Mrs. Adini. And finally, we have another great special panelist here. We have Hajia, Dr. Hadiza Nuhu Yusuf Baba. She is the proprietress for Intercontinental Schools Kano. And just a fun fact about the school participated in our joint programs for the first time last year, and they managed to represent Nigeria for the Africa Company of the Year competition last year. So welcome, Hajia, Dr. Hadiza. You can just like quickly unmute to just say hello briefly.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right, great. That is, those are all our panelists here. And like I mentioned, my name is Kilali, and we're just going to be having a very enriching conversation. So what I would advise for the audience is to just sit back, take notes, note down your questions on on the YouTube live comment page, and we'll be willing to answer all of your questions. So let's just get started. But before we get started, I just have to like quickly read the bios. I just wanted to give like a brief introduction, just like an informal introduction, and now we're going to go into a formal introduction. Just give me a second. So I'm just going to quickly like read the bios of our panelists so that the audience can also have an idea of get to know them, more about them. Some might not have heard of Teach for Nigeria, some might not have heard of Junior Achievement, so it's just good to put faces to names and also to like put like the necessary background. So to have necessary background information rather. So let me just start with Mrs. Adeni's profile. Molade Adeni is a visionary leader, passionate about empowering West Africa's children and youth to unlock their full potential. Her inspiring journey showcases dedication, leadership, and strategic experience. Molade is the CEO at Teach for Nigeria, an organization with a mission to mobilize leaders who will drive the movement towards educational equity and excellence in Nigeria. With a profound commitment to achieving this organization's mission, Molade plays a pivotal role in setting strategic business goals and guiding the direction that consistently generates opportunities leading to sustained impact, revenue growth, and added value to the organization. Prior to joining Teach for Nigeria, Molade was the CEO of West Africa Vocational Education WAVE, an organization dedicated to empowering the youth of West Africa with the skills and opportunities they need to realize their full potential. Following almost 6 years in the capacity of CEO, Molade now serves as a board member of WAVE. As a registered pharmacist recognized by the Pharmacists Council of Nigeria and the General Pharmaceutical Council UK, Molade has fortified her academic foundation with the completion of a senior management program at the Lagos Business School. She also holds a postgraduate diploma specializing in strategic management and marketing from King's College, University of London. Molade's commitment to leadership excellence has been acknowledged through her participation as a 2025 Talberg Mentorship Fellow, a 2021 Perennial Leadership Fellow, and a 2021 West Africa Acumen Fellow. Her professional journey is a testament to her diverse expertise, encompassing her business development, operational and strategic management of several special projects, fundraising, financial sustainability, growth and scaling, learning and development, marketing and communications, and people management. Molade's passion for supporting children, youth, and women has found expression through her dedicated membership in the Women in Management, Business, and Public Sector WIMBIZ. Within WIMBIZ, she has served various committees, including chairing the annual conference pairing group, and she has provided mentorship to numerous individuals through the mentorship program. She also serves the board of various organizations, including Alpha Nigeria, WAVE, and Serving with Love Foundation. Molade's life is a testament to the transformative power of dedication, leadership, and a profound commitment to empowering the youth of West Africa. When Molade speaks, her insights and experiences serve as inspirational call to action to all who aspire to make a positive impact in their communities. Molade believes that the only thing stopping you is yourself, your perspectives, and your thoughts. If you tell yourself you can't do something, then you can't do it. If you dream, reach, and try, you can make it happen. If you fail, learn from it and try again. Please, I just want everyone to give a round of applause to Mrs. Adini because that is an impressive profile. I, for one, am inspired, and I, for one, am just super excited to, get to know you more in this conversation. Let me just briefly introduce Hajia Dr. Hadiza. I'm just so Hajia Dr. Hadiza Nuhu Yusuf Baba is the proprietress of Intercontinental Schools Kano, but is also the founder of Intercontinental Golden Heart Charity Foundation and the Nuru Iraman Voluntary School for Orphans. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So, no, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. Hajia Dr. Hadiza is a seasoned education leader whose career spans over 30 years in transforming Nigeria's educational landscape. As a proprietress of Intercontinental Schools in Kano, she has been at the forefront of implementing innovative teaching models that integrate Montessori methodologies, digital literacy, and inclusive educational practices. Her academic journey, ranging from a BA in agriculture at Ahmadu Bello University to advanced degrees in education administration and guidance, has equipped her with a robust foundation in educational planning and leadership. Beyond her role in school administration, Hajia is a passionate advocate for change. She founded Intercontinental Golden Heart Charity Foundation and the Nuru Iraman. Sorry? Nuru Iraman. I hope I got that right now. Great. Yes. School for Orphans. Initiatives that have made quality education accessible to underprivileged children. These efforts highlight her deep commitment to using education as a means to uplift communities and foster long-term societal improvement. Her extensive professional training, apologies about that, sorry, there was a technical glitch. Her extensive professional training, including various postgraduate diplomas and certifications in early childhood education, underscores her expertise in nurturing young minds. Moreover, her active membership in national and international professional organizations reflects her recognition as a thought leader in education reform. Through her tireless work in teacher training and school management and policy advocacy, Hajia continues to shape a future-ready education system in Nigeria, one that empowers students, supports teachers, and paves the way for a more inclusive and dynamic learning environment. Welcome once again, Hajia Dr. Hadiza. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So lastly, we have, I know I have to put one of our very own last, but you know what they say, we always have to save the best for last, is Olaolu Akogun. So Olaolu Akogun is a dedicated international development enthusiast with a successful track record in non-profit program management spanning several years. With a solid educational background in BSc Animal Nutrition, MSc and Agricultural Biochemistry and Nutrition, and a master's in Business Management from Rome Business School, and professional training from the project management, non-profit management with senior executives, leadership, etc. Olaolu brings a unique blend of expertise to his work. Throughout his career, Olaolu has showcased exceptional leadership in managing projects in collaboration with both foreign and local donors, leading to tangible improvements in the livelihoods of beneficiaries. His experience in the nonprofit sector, particularly in agribusiness development, laid the foundation for his transition into youth economic education. As the Senior Programs Manager at Junior Achievement Nigeria, Olaolu has significantly impacted the lives of over 200,000 young people across Nigeria through strategic collaborations with global organizations such as Total Energies, KPMG, General Electric, Delta Airlines, Johnson & Johnson, Boeing, and so many others, also including, Citi Foundation and the Central Bank of Nigeria. He has spearheaded initiatives focused on financial literacy, work readiness, digital literacy, and entrepreneurship skills for young people across Nigeria. Olaolu also serves, as the Senior Programs Manager at Junior Achievement Nigeria, providing strategic vision to expand the organization's reach and impact nationwide. Beyond his professional endeavors, Olaolu co-owns a thriving restaurant with his wife in Lagos, and with a passion for driving positive change and a proven track record for success, Olaolu stands as a force in the field of international development, dedicated to shaping a brighter future for generations to come. Welcome once again, Olaolu. I feel like I know you from work, but from reading your bio, I feel like there's more to you. So I hope I get to know you more in this conversation. Great. And lastly, I forgot to introduce Junior Achievement Nigeria. Junior Achievement is a leading organization focusing on empowering young people, inspiring and developing them to succeed in the global economy. We do programs ranging from digital literacy, financial literacy, work readiness, and entrepreneurship. We are not just based in Nigeria, we are also based, we're part of a global network of over 100 countries and currently expanding. And we look forward to an insightful conversation because this conversation, as Junior Achievements, we mainly work with schools, with young people who are in education or young people who recently left in education. So this is a very, very important conversation for us to have. Right. So before we begin, in the meantime, I'm going to also ask the audience where they're joining from. You can just put it in the comment section where, like your location, where you are. You can also add where you are currently. You can say, oh, I'm at work, I'm in transit, I'm at school, I'm in NYSC camp, wherever you are, right? We just want to know that you're with us and you're engaging in the conversation on the chat. So before we begin with our questions on this important topic. Mrs. Adeni, would you like to give a brief introduction of Teach for Nigeria and the work that you do? I know we touched upon that in your bio, but I just wanted you to expatiate a lot more on that.
Okay, I really wish we'd get into the meat of the matter. But anyway, it's good to be here again. Teach for Nigeria. Again, we are also a part of a global network of about 62 countries, and we all have the same unified vision. And that is we recruit, top high potential graduates, and they go through a 2-year fellowship. And this 2-year fellowship is aimed at improving the quality of education in our public schools. So the 2-year fellowship includes, after the recruitment and selection, there's a training that they go through to prepare them to teach in our classrooms, both primary and in secondary schools. And in the 2 years, they're there, just helping ensure that every single child can attain an excellent education through some of the principles, the pedagogical principles that we teach them, but also in just the way of being in the classroom with the students. But I think, what is unique about our model is when they're not called teachers, they're called leaders. Because at the end of the day, what we're building is an army of leaders who are passionate about education, such that after the 2 years fellowship, they're still connected to, transforming education in one way or another, either by staying in the classrooms or by becoming policymakers or by, driving other educational reforms. And we've seen that happen over and over and over. And over, the last 8 years, we currently have an army of over, an alumni army of over 2,000 young men and women out there who are championing the cause for education and quality education in Nigeria. I'll stop there. I mean, websites, you can see our website on my banner. So visit us for more information.
Great. Thank you so much, Mrs. Adini. And I love what you mentioned that teachers are leaders because at Junior Achievement, we always think that students and the beneficiaries are leaders. So I'm glad that we all align with the same idea that everyone in education is a leader in their own right. Right. So let me start with you, Mrs. Adini. You mentioned something important that you are equipping talented young graduates for their career in the public education system. So according to you, why do you think the Nigerian government is changing the school system from the traditional 633 form model to a 12-year model?
I mean, so anyway, you said, why do I think? I'm not in the head to know exactly why they're doing this, but I think maybe we should start with some numbers that would probably help us put things in perspective. So according to a UNESCO report, it actually reports that there are over 20 million out of school children, and this is one of the highest globally. 20 million out of school children in our country, Nigeria. And this is one of the highest globally when you look at, other countries in sub-Saharan Africa or even just globally generally. And I think one of the things that we have seen, even with our work at Teach for Nigeria, is we find that, with the 6-3-3-4, it means that, 6 years of primary school, 3 years of junior secondary, 3 years of senior secondary, and 4 years of tertiary education, even though tertiary education can be plus or minus depending on your degree. But that's what that means. So let's even set that foundation so people understand. But because you kind of have the 6-3-3, we find that, the drop from junior secondary to senior secondary is quite high. And even when you look at it from a gender perspective, and I know it's not a gender conversation, but even more girls drop out at that point. So some statistics show that, almost 30 to 40% of people do not move from junior secondary to senior secondary school. Again, because it's a 6-3-3, it almost becomes a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a suggestion, it's not mandatory. So when we move to a 12-4, as an example, it now makes primary, junior secondary, and secondary school mandatory and compulsory. So if I was to answer your question around why do I think that, this is happening, I think one is around retention, right? How do we also ensure that students are being, or children are being retained in school and actually finishing and completing both primary and secondary school? The second, is also around improving literacy and numeracy rates. If we look at some of the data out there as well, we still see, depending on where you are, depending on what state you are, literacy rates and numeracy rates are not where we need it to be. So going to a 12-4 system, the idea is if we can keep children longer in school, we can hopefully continue to improve the quality of education and, help children get to where they need to in terms of education attainment. But I will put a caveat. It's not just about changing. I mean, I know that the conversation will move to that. It's not just about, changing it from a 6-3-3-4 to a 12-4. I think that there's so many other things that needs to happen, even with this change, to ensure that the outcomes that we want to see, which is improved numeracy and literacy, improved, excellent education outcomes for children, getting children even ready to tackle the world of work out there. The things that needs to happen in addition to this 12-4, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm sure we will get to discuss more of that. But yeah, so if I was to postulate an idea, I would say is to enhance student retention, improve learning outcomes, and promote educational, equity across the nation, just so that, we're ensuring that at least primary, secondary school, every child sort of gets access to that. So I'll pause there and we can carry on the conversation.
Thank you so much. And that's something when that's something I personally didn't really think about the jump and the different stages and how sometimes retention can drop between each stage. So hopefully with the 12-year system, like you mentioned, it's to improve retention and educational outcomes and also equity. Speaking more about equity and the current state of our education system, Olaolu, according to you, especially in your work as senior programs manager at Junior Achievement Nigeria, and from the experiences of implementing programs in schools mainly, what are the problems in our current school system? Do you think what problems? Apologies, let me rephrase this question. What problems in our current school system do you think this model is trying to fix? Now, we heard Mrs. Adeniyi's perspective on, why this change is coming about, but maybe there's something else that you have noticed from a program implementation that you think this change might be trying to address. So over to you, Olaolu.
All right, thank you, Kilali. And I think Molade has kind of built a foundation for this with the data she, stated earlier and some of the points she made as well. So for me, I think the first thing I see is, the opportunity for dropout that she's mentioned. The current structure doesn't emphasize the need to complete, the basic education. So with this new model, since it's a straight line, 12 years curriculum structure, young people or children that are going to school are compelled to complete the 12 years, ensuring that basic education is acquired by every young child that goes into school at that level. And I think another thing that has been emphasized, from some of the things, materials I've read, is also the need to include, to close the vocational gap. It was stated by personnel of the Ministry of Education that the current educational structure focuses mainly on the theoretical aspects. And so with this new structure, they're also trying to bring in vocational acquisition of vocational skills, which is part of what we stand for at Junior Achievement Nigeria. Because I mean, we believe that the educational system shouldn't just be focused on the theoretical aspect. There are life skills that can be acquired, such as the ones that are covered by entrepreneurship and the different core pillars that we focus on. And I think another thing that is really important is also global competitiveness. If you look at the current educational structure that we have, I wouldn't say confidently that it is globally competitive. So with this new adjustment, I believe young people that go through the basic education will be more competitive. So while this change would bring some level of improvements, I would say that it cannot achieve all the improvements that we require. So for me, I would say that this structure will bring some changes. However, there are other things that need to be considered. So if you are changing the structure, what are you also imputing into the curriculum? If you want to make it globally competitive, if you want to reduce the dropout rates, and if you are making it the straight line basic educational structure, how are you ensuring affordability and accessibility as well? So these are some of the other things that need to go hand in hand with this structure that is being changed. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olaolu. So you mentioned you're piggybacking off what Mrs. Adeni mentioned when it comes to school retention, but you also gave a very good insight on the global competitiveness, and hopefully the change is supposed to make young Nigerians leaving the education system more competitive on a global scale. But you also raised the issue of the accessibility and affordability of education, something that Mrs. Adeni mentioned of, besides changing the overall packaging and structure, so to speak, what are the other key changes that we're going to see from this policy? So great, thank you so much. Now, our conversation has focused mainly on students and what students are going to face and how they're going to see this change, students and teachers, students and parents mainly. But we want to know what would be the reaction from the schools and from the teachers' perspective. So this question, I would like Mrs. Adini, but also Hajia, Dr. Hadiza, to also give to answer this question as well. So the question is, do you think teachers and schools will easily adjust to this new system? So I'll pass over the mic to Mrs. Adini first, and then also to Hajia, Dr. Hadiza, because it would be interesting to also hear her own perspectives as an educator. So over to you, Mrs. Adini.
Thank you, Kilali. So you know what? Change is the constant in life, right? If nothing else, change will happen. And change also comes with a lot of, discomfort generally. It doesn't matter what type of change it is. If I tell you tomorrow, for instance, that the route you have always gone to go to work, you must now change it, there's roadworks going on. You will grumble for a little bit, but you put on your critical thinking hat and problem solving and figure it out and then adjust. The answer to your question is yes. I think people are going to, be a little bit, uncomfortable with the change. And what that means is when there's change, there needs to be proper change management. So change management from the teachers, the school leaders, parents, all the stakeholders involved. It's, part of ensuring that this is successful if we go down this route is ensuring that there's proper stakeholder engagement across every single stakeholder level. I mean, I teach for Nigeria, for instance, when we train our fellows, we train on adaptive teaching strategies, or yes, adapting teaching strategies, which means that things can change at a time. So we teach them, we give them coping mechanisms or ways that they can adapt to changes. I mean, our fellows go to some of the most, difficult and challenging communities that you can imagine. So it's out of your comfort zone. So again, there needs to be a lot of training, a lot of, even for the teachers, teacher training, existing teacher training, school leaders training. This thing has also happened in other countries. How can we also borrow from best practices of countries that already have a 12-year or more secondary school system? I think also the big change and how, these people would think to adjust this curriculum development. Olalo talked about, this vocational training, right? And how we need to also think differently around that. If we're adding this to the curriculum, people need to understand, what does that mean for me? What does that mean in terms of a school day? So I think stakeholder engagement is extremely important. I mean, the last thing I would say before I hand over to Hajia is around infrastructure enhancement. If we're going to do this, we've talked a lot about what our schools need to look like, what facilities are needed. And therefore, I think it's essential and critically important that, we're also talking about infrastructure enhancement so that, not only are we training the teachers on what to do, but they have the enabling environment to be able to do this. The students also have the enabling environment as well. So let me pause there and hand over to Hajia for her comments and thoughts on this.
Well, as a school owner, we have been going over changes in the curriculum, in the system. And I think this 12-year basic educational system is really going to be good for us because it removes that gap, 6 gap, 4 gap, 3 gap. So all those gaps are going to be removed. And coming from the north is really going to pay us better because in public schools, for example, when the female child finishes from JS3, they celebrate, they have finished. So for parents that are not educated and they don't know the system, they feel, okay, my child has finished school, so get her married. So this gaps creates this false hopes for the parents of our children have finished schools. So with this 12-year system, the gaps are going to be removed, so there will be less dropouts for children, especially in the north. Also, we should know that because it's a straight system, all these high-stakes exams will not happen. For example, common entrance examinations, NACO, junior NACO exams, KRD exams, all these are exams that children take to move to the next level. But now there is a straight path. So for me, as a school owner, I think this is will really benefit. And as for change, like what she said, the earlier speaker said, she said that for schools to change is going to be easy because change is inevitable and we will always change. And there are countries developed countries have tried this system, like in Turkey, in I think Mongolia, in Ontario district. They've all tried this system and it has been successful for them. So since some developed countries have tried this system, we will also benefit from their lessons. And I think we're good to go.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Adinini and Hajia, Dr. Adiza. And you both speak. The key thing that I took away was change is inevitable, obviously, but we need to also ensure that there's proper change management. And Hajia, Dr. Adiza, you also spoke on the possible benefits, especially coming from, your school is based in Kano, and from your experience in the education system in the North, you spoke about, the benefits of retention of students in school, especially for the girl child in school. Are there, in your opinion, are there other benefits that this change can have to improve the quality of education in Nigeria? You mentioned about the retention of students, especially the girl child. I don't know if you know of if there are any other benefits, maybe something that might be unexpected.
Yes, like stress will definitely be reduced. And also there will be diverse assessment methods will be encouraged due to the elimination of the high-stakes exams I mentioned earlier. And focusing on sustained comprehension and problem solving rather than just school attendance or certificate acquisition is another key lesson from the 12-year model. So I think with all these advantages, if we look at the statistics, like Nigeria's literacy rate was about 58.22% in 2026, and it reached 63.1% in 2021 and dropped to 59.57% in 2024. Between 2018 and 2023, there was a 67% completion rate amongst males in secondary schools, while the figure is about 53% in females. Also, the performances in the West African Senior Examination, which is WAEC, has actually fluctuated. So you could see gaps from the 6334 system. There are a lot of gaps, which we hope the 12-year basic educational system would cover up those gaps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you made mention of the key thing, which is like high stakes examinations. I know from, I'm sure I'm not the only one, and I'm sure like the viewers are not the only ones that were very, very stressed and very anxious and very nervous, especially the big examinations that you have. And you also made mention of the continuity, right? And we look forward to this change. And thank you so much for your insights, especially for the stress. And I also want to make mention that I see your passion in education. I see that in your background. You have the graduation process from your children, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, I love the background very much. It's really apt for this conversation. All right, so we're going to continue the conversation, but before we do so, I would encourage the audience to drop their questions and their comments in the chat as the conversation is going, so that by the time we're asking for questions, your mind isn't suddenly blank. So we can just have the questions running in the chat box and we'll answer them in due course. So we have spoken about the benefits, we've spoken about the possible changes, we've spoken about the limitations of the system. But I want to ask Olaolu about the role of technology in the education system. Do you think technology will play a bigger role in schools under the new system? And how will students from rural areas adapt to this new system without too many challenges?
All right. Technology. I mean, there's nothing you're doing now. If you want to do things right, that you don't have to involve technology. So firstly, this structure is being changed. And I want to also believe that the proponents of this structure are also thinking about how to infuse technology into the educational system, because we live in a world that is driven by technology now. And if you are doing anything now, there must be an infusion of technology. I mean, AI is the new thing now, driving changes across different sectors. There's infusion of AI into practically anything you can think of now. So I want to believe, because I mean, I'm not part of those who have developed this, but I believe anything that is being developed in 2025 should have an infusion of technology, better than what it used to be, and taking it to the rural communities. So there's been a huge gap, between education in the urban areas or very urban areas and the rural communities for such a long time. I mean, I used to work in rural development in my previous stint in the nonprofit space, and I went to a lot of rural communities and I saw the state of schools in most of those communities. In fact, a lot of rural communities don't have structured schools. What they have are just makeshift classrooms that are, that they attend under trees or in uncompleted buildings, and you have teachers coming in maybe just twice in a week. So that is the first level we need to address before we even start talking about technology for those in rural communities, because the basic infrastructure are not even available in the rural communities. That's the number one thing we need to address. And in infusing technology, there are low-tech solutions that can also be adopted for rural communities, such that they will also be able to have access to to technology. So another thing that can be done is, I don't think government should look at this as just a government thing. There's a need to have stakeholders come together to look at this new proposed structure and look at how the different roles key stakeholders can play. For example, we have technology companies, we have telecommunication companies, we have a lot of companies that do different things, financial institutions and all that. If there can be a consortium that can be formed to close the infrastructural gap in the rural communities, such that they will have the basic structure and they will also have access to, to technology, digital devices and internet and the likes. For example, for us, we implement a lot of programs in the, what's it called, underserved communities. And when we're going to these schools, we have to go with digital devices. A lot of times, as basic as projectors, we have to rent projectors and go to all of these schools. And so if the things can be looked at holistically, such that there is a what's it called, holistic plan that caters for the different aspects. And I mentioned this doesn't just have to be a government thing. For example, we as an organization, we have insight into how things should be, because we're not just a local organization. We have insight from different communities across the world. We have Teach for Nigeria here. They have experience as to how things should be. And, if you come together and look at, the rural communities, look at, the urban areas, we can all advise, and government can also pull from the resources of the private sector and even, other sectors to close some of these gaps. So I want to believe that they are thinking about more infusion of technology into the basic education system structure in Nigeria, such that we are not just reverting to just doing things theoretically and not being up to date with the curriculum. And that was why I said earlier that this structure in itself would not achieve all the changes that they want to achieve without developing the different aspects of the educational system as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olaolu. And you made a good point about technology, because I remember that you mentioned that this change with the whole, one of the main drivers behind the change is to have young people who are ready for the global economy. That includes technology, but also you also mentioned on the power of partnerships in bridging the gap, especially the infrastructural gap that exists in schools, especially in rural areas. Dr. Hadiza Amin mentioned about how, and Dr. Dr. Hadiza and also Mrs. Adini mentioned about how we have to also think about bridging educational inequity, not just in schools, across gender lines, in urban and rural lines. So hopefully this, consortium can also be thinking of, the government could also be thinking of, also outside the curriculum and the educational outcomes, the infrastructure that's needed to make sure that the young people of today, or tomorrow rather, are ready with its key technical and technological skills. Right. Thank you so much. So we have an interesting comment from YouTube from one of our viewers, right? And the commenter made mention that the proposed system will benefit school owners because the profit margin will increase and the system will encourage more school dropouts. Now, this is a very interesting comment. And I just want us to have a quick discussion of how true or false this sentiment might be. But I would like to direct this question to Hajia Dr. Hadiza, because you made mention of the benefits of the schooling system for students and also for teachers, and how change is inevitable and teachers will easily adapt to this change. But regarding this particular comment, especially the question about the sentence about the system will encourage more school dropouts, what do you think about this? I would first ask you, but I'll also ask Mrs. Adini as well for her thoughts. Over to you, Hajia.
Of course not. This is a strict system. You see, in the other system, when you have the 6 years of the primary school, you get a certificate. So you can decide to go wherever you want to go or decide not to go to school at all. Then you go to the junior secondary school. When you're in the junior secondary school, you write an exam at the end of the junior secondary school and you get another certificate. So at that time, a lot of children drop out of school. One, maybe due to socioeconomic problems. Secondly, due to the fact that, okay, I've gained enough. This, what I have gained in the junior secondary school can make me work anywhere. I can speak English after all. I can read and write. So I can leave. You see, that's dropout. Then by the time you finish the secondary school, some children will believe that, okay, if I finish the secondary school, I'm good to go. I can get work here and there. That's dropout. So the commentator, I don't know what he feels about the school owners getting more money. I would want to know how, because from all indications, we're not even going to get more money. I think we're going to even get less money. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad that you even broke it down with the different certificates and how sometimes people look at the certificate and I'm like, oh, I don't have to go to junior secondary school. I don't have to go to senior secondary school. So the 12-year system is just to encourage continuity, saying that you have to, the certificate is at the end and you have to stick it till the end. Mrs. Adeni, I would love to hear your thoughts about this as well, also from the perspective of somebody that works with teachers.
I think that, when I was speaking earlier and I was talking about the need for stakeholder engagement and making sure that relevant people are brought in the room and they're carried along with these decisions, it's easy for anyone to assume that it's almost like you're forcing me to stay longer in school and therefore, it's going to affect my pocket, my bottom line. It can almost come across as a money making or something to make some people richer. But I think that when we begin to put our money where our mouth is, which is why are we really doing this? If it really is to improve learning outcomes, if it really is to help retention, if it is really to be able to help children who are coming out of secondary school to get to a level where, Laulu used the word they're globally competitive. If that is what it is, how do we then begin to show that these are the things that we're going to put in place? It's no longer a money conversation. It's now an outcomes conversation and an impact conversation. If we can truly show that, today, literacy rates are at 40, 50, maybe 60%. But when we do this, literacy rates are going to go up to 80%, 90%. If we can truly begin to show how children are going to become better equipped to handle the future that is coming, because we know that this, technology, industrial revolution, preparing for the global workspace, etc. We should have this conversation from an outcomes-driven perspective, and we should begin to see the steps that the government are putting in place to ensure that we're getting there. Then I think it no longer becomes they're trying to get more money, even if there's going to be more money, because I will have to pay something extra for, if I wouldn't have stayed, if I would have only stayed for 3 years, now I'm staying for 6 years, there may be, an extra, bottom line to my purse. But if I can see what I'm paying for, everybody wants value. Right? Everybody is driven by value. So whilst I don't know whether there would be a money conversation, I want us to shift our focus to what is the impact that this would give. And if it is, and what are the steps that are going to get us there? What are the concrete steps that are going to get us there? And if we can engage people from that perspective, I think, conversations and the questions like this will become few and far between.
Thank you so much, Haji Dr. Dizan. Thank you so much, Mrs. Adini. And one of the key things I took out from what you just mentioned was looking at not focusing on the outcome as in terms of like the monetary gain that you get from this education, but the outcomes and in terms of the educational outcomes, the long-term outcomes, the developmental outcomes. So I have a question for you related to what you said, especially when it comes to stakeholders, because in the education system, beyond the teachers and the school owners and the students, there are also parents and community leaders to encourage students to go to school, especially if they feel like, oh, you're keeping my child in this system for a lot longer than I'm used to. Maybe it's 6 years I'm used to, or 9 years, or 12 years, or more than that. So what can parents, teachers, and community leaders do to help their transition easier? And I would also add another question, that how can organizations such as Jan or Teach for Nigeria, help in making sure that not only the stakeholders are ready for that change, but also that this new system works well for all students? So there are two questions in one. I don't know if you're able to answer them separately or together, but those are the questions, because I feel like they tie into one another.
Yeah, so teachers, parents, and community and community stakeholders you mentioned. So I think even from a teaching perspective, we have to just rethink the way we teach. We can no longer continue with the traditional way of blackboard and teacher is writing on the board and people are copying from it. It may surprise you, but it still happens in some of our public schools today, and maybe even in some other private schools as well. We need to really think about what are the 21st century ways of teaching that involves project-based learning, that involves team collaboration, that involves learning through doing, having a multitude of, ways of engaging children in a classroom, understanding the different learning styles that the people that the children in your class has, and making sure that as a teacher, you are doing your best to get the best out of every single child in the classroom. So this will require teachers themselves making up their minds that, you know what, I'm going to improve myself. I'm going to do training. I will use that I will use some of this to answer your second question. I Teach for Nigeria, for instance, we do not only have our fellows training, we also do an existing teachers training. So understanding that some teachers may have been in the system for long, and we all need professional development. Some of these teachers are excellent teachers, but as you would know, if I'm an accountant today, if I don't continue to upgrade my skill, I would become redundant in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So what we do with existing teachers is bring their wealth of knowledge that they already have in teaching in the classroom and support them and help them, with new ways of new approaches. I mean, right now we are deploying foundational literacy and numeracy across primary schools. This is almost like learning through play. So children want to come to your classroom. They want to engage. We've talked about use of technology and all of that. So teachers need to move as well with the times, and also be able to support children better. And that's what we want to see with this 12-4. Curriculum review, curriculum revamp, use of workbooks, playing outside, et cetera, et cetera. For parents, and I think this is regardless of whether you're in a public or a private school, right? Parents need to be more hands-on with their children's education. It's not about outsourcing it to a school or outsourcing it to a teacher. I'm sure Hajia, Dr. Hadiza will agree with me. When you have a parent who is also interested in their child's education and you are collaborating, it means that whatever we're doing in school, the more you can do at home, to help them, you get a child who is totally, whole. And we're moving away from like I said, handwriting and just, copying down from the board to more creative thinking. We want to build problem solvers. We want to build, creative thinkers, etc. And maybe I'll on that, just a funny thing. My husband used to do something with my daughter when we're driving, just to teach her when she was doing addition, when she was much younger, with plate numbers of cars. He would say, okay, that car, there's 3 numbers, I believe in the plate numbers. He would just say, add it together. My daughter absolutely hated it, if I'm honest. But the truth is, this is how, as a parent, you can sort of get involved. Sometimes it will be subtraction. Sometimes it will do multiplication with it. So for us, it's how do we also get parents to be involved? And I see that my time is up on this, but I will just wrap up by saying, organizations like Junior Achievement Nigeria, organizations like Teach for Nigeria, we're all doing so much. And I think what we can do is more collaboration. We all have best practice. We all know things that has worked, but imagine the power when we all come together and put all of those best practices in one bucket, and we're supporting one another to truly tackle this. I think it's going to be absolutely transformational. So I do think that that's some of the things that we can begin to talk about.
Thank you so much. And thank you all. Thank you so much. And I think the biggest takeaway from what you mentioned is this isn't just a Nigerian government kind of problem to tackle. Education is something that affects us all as stakeholders, as organizations like Junior Achievement or Teach for Nigeria, school owners and teachers and students and parents and communities. All of us are going to have to be geared and equipped to this change. But I love that you also gave practical examples of how this can work for teachers with trainings, for parents with even the little things and engagements you can have with your child to promote, their learning. You made the example of the game that your husband used to do to your daughter. I remember that my mom it was one of those parents that gave my brother and I Kumon to do as well. If in the comments, if you know what Kumon is, shout out to you and everything. So great. Thank you so much. And I would also ask the same question to Olaolu, mainly about how organizations like Jan and Teach for Nigeria can contribute to making sure that this change goes smoothly, because this relates to a comment that we've gotten from the audience. Latifat asks, how do we drive for the implementation as stakeholders in education? So as a stakeholder in education, as Junior Achievement Nigeria, how do you drive, for this implementation, especially in the wake of this potential change in the education system?
Okay, so for one of the things I would say is that for us, we've always, complemented the regular education system through the series of programs that we implement. And from what I can see from what the government is trying to achieve is also to make the education system globally competitive, like I mentioned. And some of the things we've been doing, promoting entrepreneurship, all of these things are very relevant to what they're trying to do. Because just like Molade mentioned earlier, we can't continue to approach education the same way. There has to be an infusion of these soft skills, these critical thinking skills, such that the learning system is changed. There has to be a transition from the traditional learning system that currently obtains to one that is creative, that is industry-based. And so we can definitely come in because we've tried these things over the years. We have results, that we can show that. When you do this with young people, when you bring them together, give them this kind of skills, they can think on their own. They can own their economic future, as we say at Junior Achievement Nigeria. So we are very much available. I think organizations like us and Teach for Nigeria are very much interested in improving the education system, and we can definitely share with the government if given the opportunity. In fact, I mentioned earlier that one of the things the government should be looking at doing is to identify key stakeholders that have one, responsibility, one role or the other. And I would also advise them to look at the development space, because organizations have been doing things to improve the education system, to improve the learning outcomes, for young people. So if we are brought on board, we can definitely advise on how to better achieve, some of the things they're trying to do. In addition to that, of course, we also interface with students, we interface with teachers with a proper understanding of some of these things. That from time to time we have trainings for teachers, we have trainings for students. We can also better, give better orientation to young people on what the government is trying to achieve with these things, so that the reception is also better. Because change comes, but reception of change is not necessarily always pleasant. So we must also help to pushing the effect of the change, such that they have a better understanding of what more like we are also advocating for the government. Also advocating for the government, such that they have a better understanding of what the government is trying to do, and they receive it better. So I think we can come in terms of, giving ideas, capacity, supporting and training, and also in terms of orientating the teachers and students and parents as we engage with them as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olaolu. And you made mention to something that, all of us, especially at Junior Achievement Nigeria, are working together to enhance those educational outcomes. And I know that at Junior Achievement, we do this with entrepreneurship training, financial literacy training. And like Olaolu mentioned, we look forward to having those collaborations with the government and education stakeholders at large. And Hadia, Dr. Hadiza, we would want to hear your own perspective as an educator, right? I know that Mrs. Adini and Olaolu made mention of how organizations can, can contribute to making sure that this system works for everyone. But is there anything else that maybe needs to be mentioned for organizations like Junior Achievement or Teach for Nigeria to ensure that this change is helpful for everyone? Is there anything that you feel that needs to be emphasized, especially as your role as an educator and as a school proprietor, that's, in order for this change to go smoothly, not just for the students, but for the teachers as well?
Yes, the Teach for Nigeria, they're doing so much in that area. Even before this change of system came about, they're doing so much, gone through what they're doing, and it's quite impressive. Likewise, the Junior Achievement Nigeria, they're doing so much in the sense that these competitions they organize, Best Company of the Year competitions, where children were encouraged to build things ordinarily you wouldn't think they would be able to do. So they're doing so much in that area, and with or without this change of systems, they're doing well. But come to the change of the system, what I think should happen is the government should involve the stakeholders, and there should be creation of awareness. I remember when the government mentioned there's going to be a change to a new system, the 12-year system, what they succeeded in doing was confuse everyone. Now on our platform, on our association platform, okay, so now we're not going to be doing NECO. Somebody says no, but then the government reacted again. They are not canceling any examinations. I mean, that is not true. So there should be, whatever information that is going to come out from the government should be straight, should be the truth, should be the reality. Nobody should be, but by the time the government says this today, says that tomorrow, parents feel this way, parents feel, teachers feel that way, there's a lot of confusion. So I'm appealing to government and those involved in this change to create awareness in communities, among schools, and among even the children we are teaching. What we did as a school, intercontinental schools, what we did was, okay, have you heard about the new system? Is now moving from a 12-year system. A child asked me, does that mean we'll be in secondary school for 12 years? I said, no, we had to break it down, tell them what this was all about. And they said, okay. Then I gave them an example. In my own time, we did only 5 years, continuous 5 years in secondary school from 1 to 5. Like how? They were asking me like how? So that was how the curriculum was designed at that time. So even now, we as school owners should make the children understand this is the system and this is what the system holds for them. Teachers should also be educated on the system so that they know. Now, like Mr. Olaolu and Ms. Adeni mentioned, a system has to have a content. There's so many things that should be done. There's so many burgeoning issues that should be tackled before this system works. There are so many things that should be put in place before this system works. Because if the system is not well funded, they're bound to run into problems. And most of it, well, for private schools like ours, we don't really have much problem. But for public schools, that's where the problem is. And of course, there are more public schools than private schools. So now the public schools, if this system is not well taken care of, like all that are involved know what it's all about, it's still going to run into problems. You see, in Nigeria, we're good at bringing a new thing, giving consultants to do it, get a lot of money, and at the end of it, it fails. education is not a thing to play with. For every nation that has progressed or is progressing, the educational system is well taken care of. So the Nigerian government should please think about this. It's not about giving things names or new name. Or, okay, Turkey did it well, Canada did it well, Mongolia did it well. Let's bring it back to Nigeria. No, it's not about that. It's about designing a curriculum to fit in the 12 years. Intercontinental Schools has been very proactive on this. Even without this, we have moved on to compete globally. We look at what is happening in the world, and then we have moved on to compete. And a lot of like our students, right from SS2, SS3, they're involved in remote jobs. They're involved in creating a lot of things. So for God's sake, let Nigeria do it well this time around. We need this future generation to be well taken care of. It's not about changing. It's about changing, sustaining the change, and doing it properly. That's all we are asking for. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Hajia Dr. Adiza. And that is well noted. You mentioned, and this is something that we've reiterated throughout the entire conversation that we've had, that the change isn't just like calling things different names or the form. It's the form, but it's also about the substance. What is the curriculum going to be like? How do we make sure that this curriculum is making sure that our young people are prepared for it in a global standard? All right. And thank you also thank you so much for touching upon the confusion, and especially with recent changes. Somebody in the comments made mention of when they made a change with the basic and junior secondary and primary. At first, it wasn't properly implemented because people were confused. So you spoke on the need for us to drive awareness on that. Right. So we're going to just take some questions from the audience and some comments. We've had a very engaging discussion on our YouTube. But Abubakar asked, is this movement data-driven? So Olaolu, I'm going to direct that question to you. So in your own professional opinion and your also opinion on experience, do you think this movement for change is data-driven?
Well, I don't have full insight into how they came about this decision, but if we look at it from the perspective of the low literacy level and the school dropout statistics, we can assume that it is data-driven, but that's the best we can do. But we can assume that it is data-driven from that perspective. But I think since we can't answer that question, we should look at the impact that it is supposed to have. And I would also advise the government that whatever they are doing should be holistic. It shouldn't just be about creating a cosmetic change. Because what I've also realized, from a lot of things that are always done is just to create a cosmetic change, which is that it just addresses the issue at the surface without actually attending to the root cause. So if they've not critically looked at the data, then I would advise that, they do the necessary root cause analysis, the necessary needs assessments, so that the decisions that they are making are, data driven. They are drawing from insights of data that they've gathered, such that they are addressing the core problems and not just, attending to the problems at the surface, which would always resurface if they have not really attended to the root cause. So I would recommend that they do that if they've not done it. But from the best we know, if we're looking at it from the level of dropout rates, the low literacy levels, and all of that, we can assume that they use data to arrive at that. That's the best I can say for that.
Thank you so much, Olaolu. And yes, thank you so much. And again, you also mentioned like something that we've emphasized, that this change has to come with addressing the core issues, and hopefully the data does speak to the core educational issues that we have to address for why this change is needed. Now, I know that we're all having an amazing time. If left to me, I would have let this discussion go on and on, maybe over some coffee or tea. I know it's not yet 7 or 5 p.m. Maybe if we move this conversation, maybe at 7, it would be a good iftar conversation to have. But unfortunately, our time has unfortunately come to a close. So I'm going to ask all of our lovely panelists, what are final words? If you had to have like your last words of encouragement to take away from this conversation to the government or to educational stakeholders, parents or teachers, what would those words be? So I'm going to start with you, Mrs. Adeni, and then I'll go on to Hajia and then Olaolu in that order.
Thank you, Kilali. I'm going to just steal a little bit of time and just, to the last question you asked. I think, I've worked a little bit with government around putting together policies in other areas, and it's usually very data driven. It's not from a place of we don't know what we're doing and we just come up with an idea. I think the government is not very good at communicating how they got to a place. And I think that's something that needs to change, just so that people understand, why did this change happen? Let us know how you connected the dots from A to B to C. And I think where we fail, to Laulu's point, is the implementation sometimes, but more importantly, the accountability. So maybe my last words as I speak to that is, change is inevitable, like I said earlier. But should this change go ahead and should it be implemented, can we hold ourselves to a high level of accountability? What exactly are we hoping to see as a result of this change? Can we be transparent and open about that? And then can we evaluate in whatever timeline we have set for ourselves? Are we meeting our expectations? Is this change getting us to where we needed to get to, having put in all of the things we need to put in place so that we can continue to, to reinvent. Like I said, the topic for here is reimagining. And reimagining doesn't just stop with, we don't reimagine and then stop. You can't continue to reimagine based on where you are, based on the realities of the times. So my charge really is, let's be open, let's be transparent, let's have a high level of accountability, and let us truly measure impact. And I think that's the way things will ultimately become successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Adeni. And impact, accountability, and also having that accountability to measure impact is very important. Hajia, Dr. Hadiza, are there any final words from you so we can bring this discussion to a close?
Yes. Well, for now, the 12-year system has come to stay. So I want to appeal to the government to look at some challenges that comes with it, which they should look at how the implementation issues, like Ms. Adeni mentioned. Also, what are their plans on teacher training and capacity building, and also the funding of the system, also access and equity, and then the curriculum adaptation. Also, they should also look at areas of enriching the curriculum so that we can have an encompassing, holistic approach to the 12-year system, so that when it's implemented, we know as when a child finishes his secondary school, he can cope anywhere in the world, no matter what. He is well-rounded. So if the government can do this, I think we're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hajia, Dr. Hadiza. So I mentioned, I'm noting down the words. The first word, accountability. Second word, you mainly mentioned on implementation, especially a holistic implementation. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Olaolu. What are your own final words as key takeaways from this conversation that we've had?
All right. So for me, I think one thing I would recommend is that there is need to drive collaborations across different sectors, especially when you are considering the implementation of this new structure. There's a need to bring different stakeholders on board to share insight from what they've been able to do in their own right, and also recommend how things can be done so that this can have a smooth landing Then the second thing is also in terms of resources. But like I mentioned earlier, if the government is going to do this successfully, there will be need for a high level of funding that will be required to achieve these. So I would also say that government should be looking at like a sort of private, government-private partnership, so such that there will be more funding, to be able to address this, not just for the rural, what's it called, the urban areas, but especially for the rural communities. Like I mentioned, there's a huge infrastructural gap in the underserved communities. And if we are bringing a new system of education that we expect to have a high level of innovation of technology, then there's a need to close the infrastructural gap in such communities. So partnerships, collaborations, and also what's it called, funding, a new funding mechanism such that it's not fully dependent on the government. Otherwise, this to an extent will be dead on arrival because money is required to fund this new structure. And just to mention, I know that there's a level of the budget, there's a certain percentage of the budget that is expected to be dedicated to education, which I know that we've not been able to achieve over the last couple of years, both at the federal and at the state levels. And that is because the government is trying to do this by themselves. So if government looks at an ingenious way to go about, partnering with private organizations and maybe development organizations, we can close this gap. So I think those will be my last words. And let us collaborate, just like Molade mentioned earlier. We're all in this together. It's not just the work of the government, but let the government also give room for us to share our inputs into this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you mentioned collaboration and resources, and that is just a summary of all this conversation. And I just want to especially thank Olaolu. I want to thank Teach for Nigeria and Mrs. Adini for partnering with us on this conversation. And also Hajia Dr. Hadiza, thank you so much for your time, for your insights, for your expertise, and also from speaking from your own wealth of experience. I've jotted down so many notes. I'm sure that the audience has also done so. So we have successfully brought this conversation to a close. Thank you so much to our amazing audience with your comments. Unfortunately, we weren't able to address all of them, but you can continue this conversation, continue this debate, continue this discussion in our social media posts, Teach for Nigeria social media posts, and in also future conversations like this to come. You can follow us on our social media at Junior Achievement Nigeria. This is Junior Achievement Nigeria on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and on Twitter or X and Instagram, we are at JA Nigeria. So you can follow us on there to continue this conversation. Don't leave these conversations to just this YouTube discussion. You can always continue them in our social media, in your classrooms, in your offices, in your workplaces. So that we can also have this conversation. And I will also encourage you to follow Teach for Nigeria. Mrs. Adini put the website on there on her Zoom background. So please follow Teach for Nigeria on all their platforms, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram, X, wherever your social media platform of choice. Make sure that you keep continuing this conversation because it's an important conversation to be had. And once again, on behalf of the team at Junior Achievement Nigeria, I want to say thank you. Thank you for sitting down wherever you are, in your offices, classrooms, on the road, for this amazing discussion. We talked a lot about partnerships. We talked a lot about the need for change. We talked a lot about why this change is necessary. And we all I would like to encourage all of us to not just think about the structure of this change and what this means on our day-to-day, but also think of how are we transforming this curriculum, reimagining education for a future-ready Nigeria. So that is all from me. I am Kelali David West. Once again, thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.